Namaste everybody, it's me Krishna Paudel from Nepal Open University. Today we are going to talk about presentation and formal and dynamic equivalence in translation. Today's discussion topics are background of the topic, formal equivalence, dynamic equivalence, and importance of Naida's work. Let's go ahead. First of all, background. Using Naida's theory of translation. Using Naida's theory of translation developed from his one practical work from the 1940s onwards, when he was translating and organizing the translation of the Bible. He was mainly related to Bible translation. His theory took concrete from in two major works in the 1960s. The first one is Toward the Science of Translating, which was published in 1964, and another was co-authored with Tabler, in topic the theory and practice of translation in 1969. Central to Naida's work is a move away from the world idea that an orthographic word has a fixed meaning and towards a functional definition of meaning in which a word acquires meaning through its context and can produce varying responses according to culture. And sequence the two words, the terms dynamic equivalence and formal equivalence in translation. The terms dynamic equivalence and formal equivalence coined by Eugene Naida are associated with two dissimilar translation approaches that are employed to achieve different levels of literalness between the source text and the target text, as evidenced in biblical translation. And these two have been understood basically as following. The first one, dynamic equivalence, is understood as sense for sense translation. Mainly it is sense for sense translation, translating the meaning of phrases or whole sentence with reliability in mind. And the next one, formal equivalence in translation, is known as word for word translation, translating the meaning of words and phrase in a more literal way. It is also called the literal translation, keeping literal conformity. And what is formal equivalence then? We have already talked a little. It is word-to-word translation or literal translation. It focuses on the message itself in both form and content. Under the form there is syntax and idioms, and under the content there is theme and concept, as literally and meaningfully as possible. It mainly focuses on form and content, not in the sense. Form and content should be the similar in target language and source language. Formal equivalence is thus the quality of translation in which the features of the form of the source text have been mechanically reproduced in a reporter-receptor language. Naida and Tabler 1969. What is said is that formal equivalence is quality of translation in which the features of form of the source text. Features of the form of source text is it focuses on the form of the source text to the receptor's language. A general tendency towards formal equivalence is characterized by, for example, a concern for accuracy. There should be the accuracy in content, in form. And a preference for retaining the original wording wherever possible. It refers to the wording, original wording, as much as possible. And next one is dynamic equivalence. We have talked a little earlier also. It is sense to sense translation. Dynamic or functional or equivalence is based on what Naida calls the principle of equivalent effect. There should be equivalent effect involved, where the relationship between receptor and message should be substantially the same as that which existed between the original receptors and the message. Yes, there should be the equivalent effect in both, in the original receptor and the targeted receptor. Dynamic equivalence aims at complete naturalness of expression. There should be naturalness. This requires adaptation of three things. In dynamic equivalence in translation, there should be adaptation of grammar, lexicon, and cultural references. There should be an equivalent effect. And correspondence in meaning must have priority over correspondence in style. we should give the priority. We should give priority to the meaning, not the style, not the form. In dynamic equivalence, if equivalent effect is to be achieved, we have to give priority to the meaning. Dynamic equivalence is the quality which characterizes the translation in which the message of original text has been so transposed into the receptor language that the response of the receptor is essentially like that of the original receptor. Yes. What is the focus here is that the response given by the original receptor and the new receptor, that is translated language receptor, both of the response to the text should be the same. This is the dynamic equivalence. So it focuses on the sense to sense translation. According to NIDA, a successful translation has to have the following four things. It should make sense, has to make sense in the translated text. It conveys the spirit and manner of the original text. Have a natural form of expression, not the jargons. There should be the natural flow. And the last one is produce a similar response. We have already talked about it. It should produce a similar response between the original receptor and the targeted language receptor. These four things should be there to be a successful translation according to NIDA. And here are some differences between formal and dynamic equivalence in translation. First one, formal. Formal translation or formal equivalence translation focuses on the message itself in both form and content. It gives focus on form and content. It is word for word translation. Here the receptor language should match as close as possible the different elements in the source language, and it is literal translation. Whereas dynamic equivalence in translation is sense for sense translation, not form and content. Not so concerned with matching the receptor language message with the source language message. Aims at complete naturalness of expression. Relates the receptor to modes of behavior relevant within the context of his own culture. Here is one example for Romans. Informal, heap coals of fire on his head. It is word to word translation. Yes, all the words are there from the source language to the targeted language as much as possible. Heap coals, direct. It is direct. Heap coals of fire on his head. But in dynamic, what would be the translation? For example, to make someone ashamed of his behavior. Here means we can use idioms and phrases, not direct word to word. And now let's talk about importance of the NIDA's work. He pointed the road away from strict word for word equivalence. He introduced a receptor-based orientation to translation theory. NIDA's detailed description of real translation phenomena and situation is an important rejoinder to the vague writing on translation that had preceded it. And he influenced later scholars also in translation studies. However, some scholars criticized him, concerned with the word level, yes, and neglecting cultural differences. Thank you and namaste to everybody.